Please pray with me as we move into our time of reflection. Oh, healing Spirit, life-giving Spirit, renewing Spirit, forgiving Spirit, minister to us, your people, according to everyone who is watching, according to each person's particular need. May only truth be spoken. May only truth be heard, we ask. Amen. There's an old quote that many of us learned when we were studying Shakespeare, and we probably didn't remember much of what we learned, but maybe we remembered this quote. That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. That quote comes from Romeo and Juliet, where the families were saying that you can't have love between these two warring families. And Juliet says this phrase in reference to family and in reference to the family name of Romeo. And she says, that which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. You can call a rose any name you want. You can call a rose ugly. You can call a rose nasty, but that rose is going to smell sweet because it's a rose. And so what it's basically saying is that what matters is not what we name something, but what something really is. And so I want to talk about Easter today, not just in the context of Christian tradition, but as a universal cosmic reality called many different names by people all around the globe, but a reality that we all share in this amazing universe. The study of world religions and interfaith dialogue reveals that we're just one human family, living out the same mysteries of life and death and new life, even though we express ourselves with different symbols, different sacred stories, different rituals. Reminds me of an old joke, maybe you heard it. There was a priest and the Baptist minister and a rabbi, and they were having a drink. They used to get together to support one another weekly, and they decided they'd take on a challenge to convert a bear. And so they went out to find the bear, and the next week they got together, and so the priest begins, and the priest said, when I found the bear, I read to him from the catechism, and I sprinkled him with holy water, and next week is his first communion. And the minister said, well, I found a bear by the stream, and I preached God's holy word, and the bear was so mesmerized, he let me baptize him. Then they both took a look at the rabbi who was lying on a stretcher in a full body cast. Looking back, he says, maybe I should not have started with the circumcision. Well, we all have our traditions, but a bear is a bear, and Easter is universal. It's a cosmic reality, by what other name you call it and what other name a religion calls it. I mean, springtime. I mean, all the cultures of the world that celebrate spring have their own sacred stories and rituals around springtime, just as they have around creation. And why not? My goodness, it's the great blessing of life. I mean, we get to be beings instead of just inert matter. You know, like lying on planets and the sun and everywhere else and gases. And not only that, you know that 2/3 of the life in the world today is bacteria? Aren't you glad you're not bacteria? I mean, honestly, you talk about winning the lottery. Every one of us listen to this. We have won the lottery. These are cosmic things to be grateful for and to celebrate and give thanks for. And every culture celebrates the victory of the powers of life and love over the powers of evil and darkness and death. Because every culture, everybody in this world struggles with that and collectively struggles against evil and the difficulties of death. And the Greek religion in our first hymn, the phoenix, the rising of the phoenix, that comes from the Greek tradition and a beautiful symbol of from ashes to rebirth. That's what Easter is. And in Judaism, it was the power to overcome corruption, and oppression and slavery that was seen as the great Easter experience. Because the great prophets, Enoch and Elijah, who partnered with the Spirit to create a better world, the stories wrote of them that they bypassed death. They were taken by God directly. Easter was so powerful in their lives, they just didn't call it Easter. And in early Christianity, Jesus wasn't the only one said to have come back from the death. The story is told of Jesus raising Joseph, Mary, Martha's brother from the dead, and a young girl. All metaphors that life transcends death. And thankfully, that is a cosmic, universal reality. And you know, we see that among people of all faiths and no faith. Near-death experiences. And mystical experiences. And we don't all have them, but some do. My wife was telling me, she's a minister for those who may not know her, and she was ministering with a woman who was dying, and this woman was an important part of her church, just an amazing person. And she had a daughter who had already passed away, and she had another daughter who was very caring for her mom, but just religion made no sense to her. God made no sense to her. She was agnostic or atheist. And she was going in to visit her mom as her mom was dying. And when she walked in the room, she saw her sister who had passed away with her mom. And she was like, I must be losing it. But then her friend came in and said, we'll say mackerel, holy mackerel, right? And there they both saw the sister who had passed on with the mom. And wouldn't it be great that we could all experience those kinds of things? But my sister-in-law, she's a nurse. And once in her career, she went to visit a patient who was dying at 4 a.m, and she saw a presence with that person. And she thought maybe she was just losing it, and so she didn't say anything. And the next night, she was on, and a nurse who had been on 2 nights before, she said something weird happened up on the 3rd floor, and the other nurses, was a patient so-and-so? Yeah. She says, you saw a spirit, didn't you? Yeah. So you see, this is a universal cosmic thing. It's just a part. And you know, a shout out to the Spiritualist Church. Early on, when they were looking at partnering and coming here and being a part of the Trinity community and renting our space, I went to one of their special services because I wanted to find out if they were nuts or not, you know? So they had a special psychic coming from Michigan, and she was late, so she never had a chance to know me or meet me or anything. And she told me that my dad was proud of me, and I thought, wow, she is so wrong, because my dad couldn't support me in anything. I mean, he didn't even go to my ordination or my wedding or anything. But then she says, and he feels bad because he was never able to support you in his life. But he is so appreciative of what you're doing in Trinity. And at that time, we had a very large cohort of youth. And she says, you're doing a lot with youth. And he just thinks that's so wonderful. You know, wow. And as my wife and I both talk to parishioners, they'll sometimes secretly talk about a mystical experience or being to a psychic and how much it meant to them. And so we want to celebrate these. Instead of having Christianity as our own little thing and everybody else is wrong, to realize what is true and right is true and right for everybody, because we're all part of the cosmos of God's love. And I remember Tom Harper saying once in a lecture, he was going to write a book on near-death experiences and what we've been talking about, and he put a note in his column in the Toronto Star to send me if you have a story. And he was blown away. He received literally thousands of letters. And most everyone said, I've never told anybody about this, because we all are afraid people are going to think we're nuts. I had a psychiatrist who taught me a course on death and grieving in seminary, and he said they won't put it in the textbooks because it's not politically correct. And medical people aren't comfortable with it. But he said if you've got parishioners who tell you that they've seen Jesus or seen their loved ones, and like that's just so common. It happens all the time. So we don't all have these experiences, but people of every culture and religion do. And we are all surrounded by Easter. And the experiences we are all called to is to wake up to the love and beauty and goodness that surrounds us. That's Easter. Easter's everywhere, but it's not going to excite us. It's not going to do something for us and fill us with gratitude if we're not paying attention to it, if we don't look for it, if we don't take our minds off our problems for a while and seek out new life. That's why we want you to go looking for signs of spring and send them in, not just so we can see them, but so you can be looking for them. Because the great thing about being spiritual beings, whatever we look for, we tend to find. It's remarkable. In fact, Kabir, a 15th century Indian mystic who was both Muslim and Buddhist, wrote this: "You have been sleeping for millions and millions of years. Why not wake up this morning?" So let's wake up this morning, eh? Let's wake up to the beauty, to the love, to the goodness of life. You know, we take drugs because drugs give us a big burst of dopamine and the other chemicals in our brain that make us feel good. But the problem is our brains are not designed to process those big hits. And so the brains begin to produce less and less dopamine as you take more and more of the drugs. And so then in time, you have to take the drugs just to feel normal. You see, what our brains love, what they're designed for, what helps lower our stress better than anything else, is having a regular diet of being amazed, of being happy, of noticing beauty, of noticing goodness. It never grows old. I've fallen in love with our cat. Honest to goodness, I am just besotted by our cat. It is the most beautiful cat I've ever seen. It looks like a little lioness. Its fur is so soft. It comes and sleeps in the bottom of our bed at night. I mean, every day I get dopamine bursts just petting and being with that cat. That's what we're made for. That's Easter. It's Easter for everybody. And I'm loving seeing nature bloom. I struggle walking with my wife because she likes to get a good walk on. I like to stop at every flower I see and just stare at it. You show me a flower. You go look at a flower and not be amazed. Wow, I don't know. But you just show me any flower and you look at that thing carefully. Well, how that could come to existence. Wow. And then there's you and me. And you're a flower too. Absolutely. And good science. I mean, science is really, good science is a branch of theology. Science that discovers nature so that it can do stuff that harms nature and kills people, that's evil science. But good science, discovering, unlocking the secrets of nature so we can live in harmony with nature and be more healthy. Wow, I mean, there is another whole area of discovering Easter and celebrating Easter. And then it's so exciting to participate in Easter, to make a difference in somebody else's life, to pay attention to somebody, to give them a boost, a younger person, to encourage them. And, you know, thank God for those few wealthy people who were generous and who could help things out. In our story today, Jesus didn't have a lot of rich people supporting him. Most of them were against him. But he had some. Thank God there are always those with privilege who are allies. And whatever privilege or wealth we have, we can be allies in participating in Easter. And he generously offered his family tomb for Jesus to be buried in. And I just love hearing the stories of people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. I love how Warren Buffett talks about how we need higher taxes on the corporations. Good for you, Warren. I mean, that's the voices we need. And thank goodness for the ability we all have in our own ways to help somebody and to share in the Easter magic. But the best part of Easter, and what I want to finish with today, is a comfort to me because we're messing up the environment so much it seems helpless. But Easter's always telling us, don't be talking about helpless. Helpless, helpless. No, 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 no. No. The best part of Easter is that whatever our culture and religious background, Easter has the capacity to take our mistakes and to create opportunities for wisdom and growth and process and progress and healing. Easter takes failure and provides a launching pad for success. Easter takes broken hearts and not only helps them to mend, but makes them stronger so they can even love more in the future. As Leonard Cohen said, there is a crack in everything. That is how the light gets in. That's Easter. The light getting in, the impossible being made possible, the unpredictable, the unreasonable, turning something around. God is in the business of streaming light into every crack, surprising us with resurrection power, rolling away the big stones over the tombs of despair and fear, allowing the rays of light to surround us with hope and joy. The best thing we can do is to release ourselves from the expectation that we can figure it all out, or that we're right when we say there's no hope. No, no, no. Our wild, unpredictable God surprises us again and again with Easter life and love. And I finish with a little reading from Anne Lamott. She's written a beautiful bestseller back in the day called Traveling Mercies, which is an autobiography of her faith journey. In one chapter of the book, she mentions that she was sure that she had witnessed the final scene of a relationship between two people in her church, when all of a sudden, God surprised everyone. A young gay man by the name of Ken started going to the small black Presbyterian church she attended. He had just lost his partner to AIDS and was beginning his own decline. People in the church watched as Ken grew sicker and sicker, most with compassion and love. But Renola, a longtime member of the choir, had a really hard time with Ken. She was a very evangelical Christian who was raised in a Southern Baptist home, and people like Ken made her nervous. She felt it wasn't right that they should be in her church. She hardly ever looked at Ken, and when she did, she only looked at him sideways. Well, Ken missed a few Sundays because he got very sick. And when he returned a month later, he weighed almost nothing. His face had become disfigured. The beginning hymn on his first Sunday back was Jacob's Ladder. Kenny couldn't even stand up, but he sang away sitting down with the hymnal in his lap. The second hymn was His Eyes on the Sparrow. Why should I feel discouraged? Why do the sparrows fall? As the congregation sang that hymn, something completely unexpected happened. Renola was watching Ken, rather skeptically for a moment. And then her face began to melt and contort like his. She got out of the choir loft, walked down, went to the side of his pew, bent over, and lifted him up as though he was a little rag doll. She then held him next to her, draped over and against her like a child, while they sang together. And then they both started to cry, tears pouring down their faces and their nose running like rivers. Renola lay her black, weeping face against his feverish white one and let his tears mingle with her own. And in that encounter, Anne Lamott realized that the God of resurrection was bursting through once again. She had thought the story of Ken and Ronaldo was over. She had thought the case was closed. But God said, oh, no, it's not, and graced everyone with a surprise ending. Friends, surprise endings are why we exist today. Surprise endings is what gives us hope in a pandemic world. And surprise endings are available to everyone in this world. But we as Christians give thanks for the stories of Jesus that remind us that Easter is always there. We give thanks that a rose by any other name smells just as sweet. And so that Easter smell is wafting over this entire world amidst our struggles, our pain, and our problems. Thanks be to God.